Hi, my name is Holly Profit. I researched becoming a licensed professional counselor. It is very similar to what I want to do in the end, either that or maybe a licensed social worker. And it really fits me and my personality. I'm definitely a helper to the core. I've always been a helper, will probably always be a helper. I always score as a helper in all of the personality tests. My Holland score was social, artistic, and investigative, which fits me very well, and I believe also fits being a therapist or licensed professional counselor very well. Also, it's something that I've been thinking about for quite a while. I've been in therapy myself for about 14 years, off and on, and all my friends tell me that I'm always really good to talk to. And so, when looking at changing careers, I decided why not do something that I already seem to be good at, and jump for it. Like substance abuse counselors in with that, and with um, licensed professional counselors and social workers. But all of those lumped together are projected to grow 17% in the next 10 years. Indeed says that the median pay in Georgia is $87,000 a year. Most of what I saw elsewhere was around 70,000, and that ranged anywhere from, across the board for the country, from 40,000 all the way up to 94,000. And of course, those would be more in areas like California and New York. So, school wise, of course, you have to have your bachelor's. You can have your bachelor's in pretty much anything, but you do have to do a master's program that is accredited, and then you have to go on and for another 3 to 4 years, depending on what type of place you're working at, and what the board deems appropriate. Then you become an associate professional counselor. You're still not licensed yet. You still have to be supervised by a counselor for those 3 to 4 years. And then once you have worked enough hours under supervision, then you can take the board and be a licensed professional counselor. Loans for students who go this route to become a licensed professional counselor or other types of counselors are 113% higher than other types of students. So it is quite a financial burden for those of us that do decide to go down this path. That's something definitely to keep in mind. So the different areas that you can work in this type of position, of course, everybody thinks of private practice. That is where most people meet a counselor. But you can also work at the VA. You can work at nonprofits. You can work even in prisons if you are brave enough and are doing well enough mentally yourself. You can work in hospitals. There's a variety of settings that you can work in. One of the great things about working for a place like the VA is their benefit package. And from my research, they are one of the higher paying entities out there. Also, working for a nonprofit. That is a great way to give back to your community. So there's, you don't have to sit in an office all day, every day. There's a bunch of different ways that you can be a licensed professional counselor. There's also telehealth. We see all these ads for these huge companies like BetterHelp and all of that. I don't know if they're any good or not. I have heard both pros and cons. But telehealth is becoming really big. So it's another thing to think about if you're thinking about becoming a licensed professional counselor. The day-to-day work for a licensed professional counselor can change. It really depends. Their schedule can be somewhat flexible. Most patients prefer to have their appointments, around their work schedule, and the vast majority of people do work like a 9 to 5, 8 to 5 type job. So most licensed professional counselors, do work in the evenings, on weekends, and stuff like that. So that is something to keep in mind. Um, they do have to be very good at keeping a schedule and staying on schedule, but scheduling patients, making sure that nobody is forgotten. When they are in a session with a client, they need to make sure that they are staying on task, not going over their time, because typically they have another patient or client, right after that. They also have to do a lot of charting, especially if the patient is for, insurance. Insurance needs everything to be documented, but you need to be documenting everything, just for that client's sake and for your own sake. That way you can look back and see, the progress that's been made, and, if anything comes up later on. Of course, dealing with insurance is a huge deal these days, huge headache also. Um, some patients don't have insurance, and there's also a sliding scale that counselors can offer patients to pay with depending on what they can pay. And then also, counselors, have to diagnose their patients, create treatment plans, and then work towards their goals with the patients and make sure that they're keeping on track with that, and make sure their patients are working towards the goals that they want to make sure that they have, a good, happy life, as much as they possibly can. Another thing to keep in mind is that counselors also have to do what's called continuing education. They have to keep up with, you know, everything that's new, and just make sure that they don't forget things. A lot of um, the health fields have to do stuff like this, and so every 2 years they have to do at least 35 hours of education. And that time, that effort, the money that is put into that, they have to come up with all of that on their own time. So some of the downsides of becoming a licensed professional counselor, there's a lot of upsides, but some of the downsides are it can be a very heavy job listening to people's issues all day, every day. Some of them can be really, really heavy and difficult to deal with. And some patients or clients are in crisis, and you have to figure out how to deal with that. And hopefully, you have the training, but it can be very difficult to deal with. And unfortunately, almost a quarter of counselors have to deal with patient suicide. And that's something that I had thought about, but not something that I had thought a lot about before doing the research for this. And what makes it even more difficult is that it's not something that the counselor can even really talk about that much because of HIPAA and the ethical standards and stuff like that. So, especially if you've worked with somebody for a long time and then that happens, it's not like you can just act like it didn't happen, but it's not like you can actually really talk about it either. So it just puts the counselor in a really horrible situation as far as dealing with the grief of it. But one of the good things that counselors can do is have their own counselor to go to therapy themselves. That can help them work through not only things in their own personal lives, but work through things with dealing with their clients as well. And it can also help them to learn to be better therapists themselves. They can see the modalities that their own therapist is working with, and how their own therapist is dealing with, certain things that they are discussing in their own sessions. So it can be really, really helpful. Some of the pros to becoming a counselor are helping people. That's the biggest one. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest reason why people get into the field. Um, but for me, also, in addition to that, is just a little bit more flexibility with my schedule. I do shift work right now, and it would be nice to have a little bit more flexibility and decide which days I work. I'm interested in doing telehealth and maybe being able to work while on vacation or away or something like that. And just, the learning new things. I'm very excited about that, and mostly just helping people. So I hope you've learned a little bit about becoming a licensed professional counselor. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed and have a great day. Thanks.